As most of you know, Amgad, Doug, and myself returned this past week from a trip to Israel, Palestine. We were part of a Presbyterian delegation with the sole express purpose to witness the suffering in the region. 35 of us, clergy, professors, lay leaders, judicatory leaders. Over 7 days, we visited many folks. We visited an Israeli father whose son had been taken hostage on October 7th. We visited Palestinian religious leaders and organizers. And as I wrote on a piece as we left of why it was important to us to go and be witnesses to the suffering, it's an important part of an expression of what it means to be a Christian. And I will confess, I went with a lot of ignorance. Now, whenever we met with Palestinians, they'd ask us to do two things. First of all, they asked us to tell their stories. We heard over and over again since the October 7th attacks that Israel and the Israelis and Palestinians are in a state of shock and have become more and more isolated because of what's going on there now. And in many ways, many of them have not had connection to or communication with people outside their communities. And many of those stories that Palestinians say are not really heard in our part of the world. And they have felt especially forgotten these days. So tell their stories, they asked us. The second thing they asked us was a challenge given to us by a Palestinian Christian pastor who said that the calling of all Christians, more importantly than anything else, is to just tell the truth. Tell the truth. And I must confess, a lot of difficulty in writing the sermon this morning. Even with that task of telling their stories and telling the truth. Because what I witnessed was far worse than I ever imagined. To be clear, we were never close to Gaza. The tragic events occurring there with the carpet bombing and destruction of cities and villages and lives, the widespread death and disease and now starvation. We never saw any of that except on the screens on TV. So I cannot speak directly to that reality other than what you see on your news. We did visit with Palestinian families who'd lost loved ones in Gaza, shared their own stories of relatives who'd been killed. But the truth was, I experienced, and I think I'll let Amgad and Doug share their own stories, I experienced something even more deeply tragic than that. In many ways, as strange as it may sound, tragic and commonplace. What we saw, went to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and the West Bank, was this everyday crushing of people. Everyday oppression of a people expressed in the practices and policies intended to make life as miserable as possible for them. What we saw, and I can only describe it in this way, was mundane and mean-spirited. There's a phrase, banality of evil. And I don't use the word evil that frequently. But there was a banality to this that was just everyday crushing. There are two worlds in Israel and Palestine. Two worlds. An Israeli world, settlements, beautiful settlements with pristine roads, beautiful buildings used by Israeli citizens. And another world of Palestinian villages with Palestinian roads. And these two worlds never crossed. It was separated intentionally into enclaves, separated by massive stone walls and military checkpoints, where each is not allowed to interact with the other. And what we witnessed, we met a man standing outside the rubble of his home, where he had lived for over 30 years with his family, multi-general children and grandchildren, a home demolished and bulldozed by Israeli defense forces. We visited a mother living in a refugee camp whose family just the week before had been visited by Israeli defense forces, and her 16-year-old son was taken. No explanation, not knowing why and for what reason, or if ever he would be released. It is the common everyday experience of Palestinians who navigate the travel on the roads amidst the separate enclaves to get to work or to schools or to a doctor's appointment, a travel that would normally take 15 minutes that would end up taking hours simply because of the checkpoints. We experienced that in a small way directly after visiting a refugee camp one evening, then traveling to our hotel in Ramallah, when we in our tourist bus got caught up in a checkpoint. We waited in that bus for 3.5 hours. And then we were let through. No one checked us. The intentionality of making life as miserable as possible. I can't tell you how often people we were supposed to meet with were late because they get caught in a checkpoint. So I must be honest, I can tell you, and will maybe tell you over the coming weeks, certain stories about what we witnessed. And I'm not sure, and I can't be honest and say I know what I'm going to do with those experiences. I'll be wrestling with them for quite some time. And wrestling with it in part because I'm not sure what it really means for my discipleship, much less how to talk about it in the context of your own discipleship. What is the appropriate response? How do we understand ourselves in the midst of it? Where is God in the midst of all of that suffering? In the face of a world filled with war and injustice and a simple lack of compassion for each other. And on top of that, what does it mean to be a church in the midst of that? And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer. And I also must be honest and say there were signs of hope for me in different people we met. in the midst of the darkness, mostly people we met from the youth group who danced in the midst of the refugee camp, to different leaders who had hope and faith in a future that's almost impossible for us to imagine. I do know that at the least I can bear witness to that suffering by speaking to what I saw. And that's what it means to be, I think, those of us who identify as Christian, to bear witness, is to tell the truth. And especially to tell the truth about those we encounter who are powerless and in pain and lost and crushed. At the very least, we can speak the truth of their experience. That's simple enough. The Greek word for witness is martyr. And that means that we witness by our lives. But to me, that doesn't feel enough, I'll be honest, to simply bear witness to the pain we see and the pain around us and the pain we carry with them. We also bear a different kind of witness, I think. A witness, as hard as it is to believe, of our own Jewish Christian tradition that I read for you. A witness to a different reality that God is creating, no matter how hard it is to see. And these words that I have read countless times in the book of Isaiah take on even deeper meaning to me as a vision for the future. For I am about to create a new heavens and new earth. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more, this means more to me now than ever, will an infant who lives but a few days. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not labor in vain or bear children of calamity. The wolf and the lamb shall lie down together. So we not only bear witness to the pain of the world, we bear witness, I want to assert, to the possibility that exists because God exists. To God be glory this day and forevermore. Amen.